Hey film fans, welcome to Cinepro, your ultimate hub for all movie recaps. From heartwarming classics to the latest blockbusters, Dave arrives at school, blending into the background as usual. No one seems to notice him except his close friends, Todd and Marty, who join him on the way to class. The day passes uneventfully until the final bell rings. At his locker, Dave spots Katie, his crush, nearby. His heart skips a beat as he watches her, hoping for a moment of connection. Katie glances in his direction and says hello. Excited, Dave quickly responds, only to realize she was talking to Erica, her friend standing behind him. Embarrassed, Dave walks away, his cheeks burning as the girls laugh softly behind him. After school, Dave and his friends head to their favorite hangout spot, the comic book store. They browse the latest issues before settling down to chat. Dave asks why there are no real superheroes in the world. Marty dismisses the idea, saying it's impossible. Todd argues that superheroes need powers, and since no one has them, there's no point in dreaming about it. Dave counters, bringing up Batman, who didn't have powers but still fought crime. While his friends agree, they point out Batman had wealth and resources that ordinary people could never afford. Dave remains firm in his belief, saying anyone can be a superhero if they truly want to, and wonders why people idolize celebrities instead of heroes. Their conversation is interrupted by Chris, a boy from school, who pulls up in his dad's flashy exotic car. As they watch him enter the store, Dave and his friends talk about how lonely Chris seems, never mingling with other kids. They think he could be a good addition to their group, but are too intimidated to approach him. They push Dave to give it a try. Reluctantly, he agrees, but as he gets close, Chris's bodyguard stops him with a sharp warning. Defeated, Dave backs off, returning to his friends. As they leave the comic shop, Marty takes a different route, leaving Dave and Todd to walk home together. Along the way, they're confronted by a group of thugs who demand their money and phones. Powerless to resist, the boys hand over their belongings. As the robbery unfolds, Dave notices a man watching but doing nothing to help. Frustrated and disheartened, he wonders why no one ever stands up to criminals. On his way home, the experience weighs heavily on Dave. He realizes the city needs someone brave enough to fight back. Inspired by his thoughts at the comic store, he decides to take action. Determined to become a superhero himself, he starts shopping online for a scuba diving suit, planning to transform it into his very own superhero costume. At a warehouse, Frank gathers with his gang to deal with Trey, who's tied to a chair. Frank and his assistant, Joe, accuse Trey of stealing their drugs. Trey insists the drugs were taken by a man who looked like Batman, but Frank dismisses the story, saying superheroes don't exist. Trey pleads his innocence, but Frank isn't convinced and orders Joe and the goons to kill him. As Frank leaves, he gets into his car and tells his son Chris that they're finally heading to the cinema. Chris worries they might be late, but Frank assures him the driver will get them there on time. Coincidentally, as Frank and Chris arrive, Dave and his friends are leaving the same cinema, but the two groups don't notice each other. Back at home, Dave is thrilled to find that his package has arrived. Opening it, he transforms the scuba diving suit into his superhero costume. Standing in front of the mirror, he strikes poses, beaming with excitement. The next day, Damon takes his daughter, Mindy, to a deserted part of the city for her training. Damon plans to shoot her again, testing her bulletproof vest. Mindy is nervous, reminding him that his last shot nearly hit her. Damon reassures her, saying she'll be fine as long as she trusts the vest. He fires, and Mindy falls but quickly gets back up. Damon praises her bravery and says she'll never need to fear thugs with the right training. Mindy, encouraged, smiles, and the two prepare for more drills. As Damon lines up his next shots, Mindy cheekily asks if they can go bowling later. Damon agrees, and they finish the session before heading to the alley as planned. After bowling, Damon treats Mindy to dinner at a restaurant. During their meal, he asks what she wants for her birthday. Mindy jokes, saying she wants a dog and a princess doll. Damon looks disappointed until Mindy bursts out laughing and reveals she was joking. What she really wants is a new set of fighting knives. Damon smiles and promises to get them for her. Meanwhile, Dave ventures into an abandoned part of the city to begin his own training. He struggles at first, even hesitating to jump between rooftops. Feeling unsure, he decides to head home. But on his way, he spots the same thugs who robbed him and Todd days ago. They're trying to break into a parked car. Determined to prove himself as a superhero, Dave quickly changes into his costume and approaches them. The thugs, confused, warn him to back off, but Dave stands his ground. In a bold voice, he commands them to leave the car, hoping this is his moment to show what he's capable of. The thugs are intrigued by Dave's attempt at heroism and mockingly ask him what he'll do if they don't back off. Despite being terrified, Dave stands his ground, but things go south quickly. One of the thugs punches him, and before he can react, another stabs him. Bleeding and in shock, Dave watches as the thugs flee. He stumbles toward the road to seek help, but a car hits him, throwing him to the ground. Instead of stopping, the driver speeds away, leaving Dave bleeding and alone. Eventually, someone calls an ambulance. Though weak, Dave musters enough strength to beg the paramedics to remove his costume so no one sees him like that. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, Joe visits Frank during a family lunch to discuss business. Frank excuses himself and heads to his office. Chris, eager to prove he's ready to learn the family trade, tries to follow, but Frank sends him back to the table, insisting he finish his meal. Frustrated, Chris wonders why why his father still treats him like a child. In the office, Joe tells Frank that they might have been wrong about Trey. One of their associates confessed to stealing from them after Trey's death. Frank, irritated, considers the possibility that Trey's story about a superhero might have been true. Unconvinced, Joe argues that superheroes are still a myth, but Frank orders him to find out who framed Trey, suspecting that person is connected to the missing drugs. The next day, Damon surprises Mindy with the fighting knives she wanted for her birthday. As she tries them out, Damon watches with pride. Later, Dave recovers from his injuries, though the severity of the attack required doctors to replace some of his broken bones with metal. When Dave returns to school, the cafeteria falls silent as everyone stares at him. Ignoring the attention, he joins Todd and Marty, who eagerly ask about his new metallic bones. Dave explains they dull pain in certain areas, which his friends test by lightly hitting him. Amazed, they marvel at how little pain he feels. At his locker, Dave is surprised when Katie approaches him, apologizing for what happened and offering to be there if he needs someone to talk to. Stunned, Dave thanks her. As she walks away, he's left in disbelief that Katie noticed him. Todd and Marty suggest she's just being nice because of his injuries, but Dave insists that she likes him. That night, Dave resumes training, pushing himself harder than before. Inspired, he creates a social media page for his superhero persona. In his first post, he introduces himself as a masked hero ready to fight crime. Feeling hopeful, he ventures out in his costume. While patrolling, Dave notices a poster for a missing cat and decides to help. He finds the cat on a high platform but falls while trying to grab it. As he gets up, he accidentally trips a man running from some thugs. The thugs thank Dave for slowing their victim down and begin beating the man. Realizing the man is innocent, Dave grabs his batons and intervenes. Though outnumbered, he fights the thugs, yelling at a nearby boy to call 911. Instead, the boy runs to a restaurant and tells everyone about the superhero fighting outside. Curious, the diners rush to the window and start recording Dave's struggle. During the fight, one thug asks Dave if he's really willing to die for a stranger. With cameras rolling, Dave, though scared, boldly declares he'll do whatever it takes to stop them. The thug leader, impressed but annoyed, calls Dave a crazy kid before ordering his men to leave. Weak but relieved, Dave helps the beaten man up, who thanks him for saving him. As the crowd gathers, someone asks Dave who he is. Standing tall despite his exhaustion, he replies, "I'm Kick-Ass." Kick-Ass becomes an internet sensation overnight after the video of his fight with the thugs goes viral on YouTube. His social media page gains a massive following, with people reaching out to him for help with various problems. The viral video makes it to the news, catching the attention of Damon and Mindy. While Mindy admires Kick-Ass, calling him pretty good, Damon dismisses him as a terrible fighter who almost got himself killed. Frank also watches the news with his family and shares Damon's sentiments, saying Kick-Ass will end up dead if he keeps trying to be a superhero. Chris, however, disagrees, thinking Kick-Ass is a decent fighter and even joking that he'd call him if he ever needed help. Frank scoffs, reminding Chris that he has plenty of men to help him instead. Chris, frustrated, mutters about not being allowed to learn anything about his father's business. The next day, Dave hangs out with Katie at the comic book shop. Katie mentions needing someone like Kick-Ass to help her with Rasul, a guy who won't stop harassing her. She apologizes for venting, but Dave brushes it off, happy to be spending time with her. Katie thanks Dave for being a good friend, making him realize she might not see him as more than that. Still, he decides to help her by confronting Rasul as Kick-Ass. That night, Dave dresses as Kick-Ass and finds Rasul's apartment. After being let in by the guard, Dave tells Rasul to leave Katie alone. Rasul laughs at him, but when Dave threatens to break his legs, Rasul gets angry. Dave uses a cheap taser to shock him, but Rasul recovers quickly and pulls out a knife. Before he can attack, a young girl in a superhero costume stabs Rasul from behind with a sword, killing him. Dave is stunned as the girl, Hit Girl, takes on Rasul's men with deadly precision. When a guard bursts in to attack her, he's killed by a sniper covering Hit Girl from outside. The sniper turns out to be Big Daddy. Hit Girl picks up the money in the room and tells Dave they need to leave via the roof to avoid a possible ambush. Dave hesitates, still shocked by the violence, but follows her advice. On the roof, Dave asks who she is, and she introduces herself as Hit Girl. She points out Big Daddy, who resembles Batman. Hit Girl then jumps to the next building, urging Dave to follow. Too scared, Dave watches as they leave, realizing they are Damon and Mindy. Disheartened, Dave heads home, feeling like a failure compared to Hit Girl. Lying on his bed, he wonders if he's cut out to be a superhero. Elsewhere, Joe shows Frank a blurry photo taken by one of Frank's men before being killed. Joe claims Kick-Ass is responsible for their men's deaths and the theft of drugs and money. Frank, furious, orders Joe to find and kill Kick-Ass. Later, Hit Girl and Big Daddy break into Dave's room. Dave panics, begging for his life, but Hit Girl calmly hands him the taser cartridge he left at the crime scene, warning it could have been traced back to him. When Dave takes it, Big Daddy snatches it back, saying they'll keep it as collateral to ensure his silence. Dave admits he's thinking of quitting as a superhero. Hit Girl says that's sad, as she believes he has potential. Big Daddy tells him the choice is his, but offers to help if Dave ever needs them. He explains that Dave can contact them by announcing a vacation on his website. Meanwhile, Frank grows frustrated that Kick-Ass hasn't been found and calls a corrupt police police chief, Gigante, demanding he use his resources to locate the masked hero. Frank then wonders why his associate, Cody, is late for their meeting. It's revealed that Hit Girl and Big Daddy have captured Cody. After extracting information from him, they crush him inside his car. Much later, a cop named Marcus gets to Damon's bunker and sees a picture of Frank and his men on the wall. He also sees one of Damon's comic books about two cops, Daddy and Marcus, who fought crime in a city where a bad guy named Frank was involved in a shady drug business. After Daddy got close to getting Frank arrested, the bad guy got him framed and sent to prison for a crime he didn't commit. While he was in prison, his wife overdosed and died just before giving birth to their baby, Mindy. Marcus then becomes Mindy's guardian while her dad continues to train in prison to be ready to take on Frank when he finally leaves. After he gets released, Daddy begins his plan to bring down Frank, but he also trains his daughter to want the same thing as him. This appears to be a true story about Damon, and as he sees Marcus in his bunker, he asks what he's doing there, who were very good at getting bad guys. Marcus asks Damon if he's really trying to make Mindy follow his dangerous plan to kill Frank. Damon says he has only made it seem like a game, but Marcus doesn't get why he would do that. Damon then asks what he wants, and he says that he only came to warn his friend that Gigante is already looking for Kick-Ass. Marcus asks if Damon knows the person, but he says he doesn't. Marcus then tells him to be careful because Frank might soon send Gigante after him if he realizes that he's behind everything that has been happening to his business. Damon says he doesn't care and that he won't stop until Frank and his business crumble. Elsewhere, Frank sees Kick-Ass walking on the street and looks shocked because he didn't think it would be so easy to find the superhero. As he tells his driver to follow him, Kick-Ass suddenly walks into a corner. Frank tells his driver to stop the car there, and as he heads out, he shoots and kills Kick-Ass, as well as a witness who saw what he did. Interestingly, it turns out that Frank only killed someone who was impersonating Kick-Ass. Meanwhile, Dave visits Katie at her workplace, and she looks very sad after hearing that Rasul is dead. She also suggests reporting Kick-Ass to the cops because she sent him an email to help her talk to Rasul. Dave tells her not to worry about it because the superhero might have not even seen her email. The next day, Frank reads in the newspaper that a Kick-Ass impersonator was killed the previous day, and this gets him pissed. As he complains to Joe, Chris hears them and interrupts their meeting. He then says he can help them catch Kick-Ass, but Frank doesn't even want to hear what he has to say. Chris insists that he has a plan and that he'll only need a few things, including a criminal who can be reported to the cops. Frank finally agrees to follow Chris's plan, and he says he knows one of his goons who won't mind going to jail. A while later, as Dave and his friends are at the comic book shop, they see a news report about a new superhero named Red Mist, who just caught a wanted drug dealer and took him to the cops. During an interview, Red Mist says he was inspired by what Kick-Ass did, and it's why he decided to become a superhero too. As he gets praised on the news, Dave doesn't seem to get what's so special about the new hero, but Katie says he did something big by catching a wanted criminal. She and his friends also mention that Red Mist seems to be cooler than Kick-Ass, especially because he wears a cape. Dave looks disappointed to hear this, but starts thinking of ways to make Kick-Ass look cooler. Later that night, he gets an email from Red Mist asking if they can meet. After thinking about it, Dave heads out to meet Red Mist. As he gets to their meeting spot, Red Mist praises Kick-Ass and says he wouldn't have considered being a hero if it wasn't for him. He also tells Kick-Ass that he's looking forward to teaming up with him in case he needs a sidekick. Kick-Ass looks shocked, but says he doesn't mind if they work together. Just then, Red Mist shows Kick-Ass his Mist Mobile and tells him that he has a mission they can work on together. Kick-Ass is surprised to see the car, but agrees to follow Red Mist. As they leave the scene, Red Mist tells Kick-Ass that he needs to inform the person they're going to save that he's coming. Kick-Ass tells him to do that, and Red Mist sends a message to someone to say he's coming. Unsurprisingly, Red Mist happens to be Chris, and the message was sent to one of his dad's thugs, who will be waiting for them at the warehouse. When they arrive, the thug calls Frank to give him an update, and Frank looks proud of his son. He also mentions that he's already on his way to see who Kick-Ass really is. After a while, Red Mist and Kick-Ass reach the warehouse, but they see that it's already on fire. Red Mist looks terrified and runs inside, but Kick-Ass doesn't understand why he's risking his life to go into the fire. He still follows Red Mist, and as he looks around, he sees some dead men in the fire. Meanwhile, Frank reaches the warehouse and sees it burning. He looks shocked by this and wonders if Kick-Ass ambushed his son and his men inside the warehouse because he doesn't know what's happening inside. Frank leaves the scene and heads home. Red Mist then picks up a teddy bear inside the warehouse before telling Kick-Ass that they need to leave. As they get outside, Kick-Ass asks why he took the teddy bear, but he says it's nothing. After a while, Chris arrives home, only to see Frank scolding Gigante for still not finding Kick-Ass, who he believes had already killed his son. Everyone looks shocked to see Chris, but he says that Kick-Ass wasn't responsible for what happened at the warehouse because they were together. He then reveals that he put a camera in the teddy bear because he wanted to film when Kick-Ass would be beaten in the warehouse. Frank and his men are shocked by this, but as Chris shows them the video, they see that Hit Girl and Big Daddy are responsible for killing Frank's men and burning his warehouse. As Frank wonders who the new heroes are, Chris says he thinks Kick-Ass might know because he said something about other heroes in the city. Frank then tells Gigante to lock down the city because he doesn't want anyone to go in or out out until he finds the two heroes who burned down his warehouse. The next day, Marcus warns Damon to lay low because Gigante has started actively searching for other heroes. Damon thanks him but turns to Mindy and says it's time to finally take down Frank. Elsewhere, Dave decides to quit being kick-ass after the events at the warehouse. Before retiring his superhero persona for good, he visits Katie's house to see if she'll like him as himself. Sneaking in through her window, Katie is startled and attacks him until he reveals his identity. Shocked, Katie asks why he's dressed as kick-ass, and Dave confesses that he is the superhero. He apologizes for keeping it from her and admits he's always loved her. Katie doesn't respond at first, but as Dave turns to leave, she stops him and confesses she likes him too. Dave stays, and the two grow closer. The next day, Dave fulfills his promise to Katie and hangs up his costume for good. The pair begin spending more time together with their friends. Days later, curiosity gets the better of Dave, and he checks his kick-ass website. Among the emails, he finds a message from Red Mist asking to meet again. Intrigued, Dave agrees and calls Katie to let her know he plans to be kick-ass one last time. Katie reluctantly agrees after he promises to be careful. Later, Dave meets Red Mist, who recounts how the men who owned the warehouse blamed him for its destruction. Red Mist explains that they found his house and destroyed it, leaving him terrified for his life. He pleads with Kick-Ass to get help from the other superheroes he mentioned before. After some thought, Dave decides to reach out to Big Daddy and Hit Girl. Elsewhere, Damon and Mindy admire a new weapon they've acquired when they notice Kick-Ass's vacation post. Damon tells Mindy to suit up, and they contact Kick-Ass to arrange a meeting. Red Mist drives to the location with Frank's men discreetly following him. When they arrive, Big Daddy is surprised to see Kick-Ass with Red Mist, but welcomes them. As Hit Girl begins introducing herself to Red Mist, he unexpectedly shoots her, sending her crashing out of the window. The betrayal leaves Kick-Ass and Big Daddy stunned as chaos erupts. Before Big Daddy and Kick-Ass can do anything, Frank's men storm in and attack them. Red Mist tries to intervene, telling them to leave Kick-Ass alone, but the men ignore him. Red Mist is taken home, where he confronts his father, complaining that Kick-Ass had nothing to do with crashing his business. Frank, however, dismisses this, saying he doesn't care and wants to send a message to show people that being a superhero is dangerous. Chris, eager to join the family business, asks what Frank plans to do. Frank tells Chris that if he wants to prove himself, he needs to sit and watch what happens next. Intrigued, Chris agrees. Frank orders a live stream to be set up, posing it as Kick-Ass announcing his retirement. The news station receives the stream link and begins broadcasting it. As Katie sees the broadcast, she becomes emotional, thinking Dave is giving up being Kick-Ass. She calls him to express her pride, but her call goes straight to voicemail. The live stream begins, but instead of a retirement announcement, a masked man appears, declaring he wants to teach people why being a superhero is a terrible idea. Viewers are horrified as they watch Kick-Ass and Big Daddy being brutally beaten by Frank's men. The thugs douse Kick-Ass and Big Daddy in gasoline, preparing to set them on fire. Katie watches in tears, unable to look away. Just as a thug lights a match, the room's lights suddenly go out. Chaos erupts as Hit Girl appears, systematically taking down the men. One of the thugs, in panic, accidentally sets Big Daddy on fire with his lighter. Hit Girl quickly kills the remaining men and extinguishes the fire, turning off the camera before anyone can see more. Viewers are left in shock, wondering who this new hero is. Frank, watching the live stream, is stunned. Meanwhile, Hit Girl removes Big Daddy's mask and cradles him as he tells her he loves her and is proud of her. Hit Girl tearfully calls him the best father in the world before he dies in her arms. As they leave the scene, Kick-Ass tells Hit Girl they should lay low to avoid attracting more enemies. However, Hit Girl insists she won't stop until her father's mission is complete. They return to Damon's bunker, where Hit Girl begins preparing weapons. Kick-Ass, shaken, suggests they give up superhero work, fearing they'll both die. Hit Girl accuses him of luring her dad into a trap, making Kick-Ass feel guilty. She declares she won't let her father's death be in vain. Moved by her determination, Kick-Ass decides to help her and picks a weapon from her collection. Later, Mindy infiltrates Frank's house, pretending to be a lost schoolgirl. Once inside, she kills the guards in the lobby and works her way through the house, eliminating more of Frank's men. Hearing gunshots, Frank hides behind his desk with Chris. One of his guards steps out to investigate while Mindy runs out of bullets and gets cornered behind a cabinet. Just as one of Frank's men readies a bazooka to finish her off, Kick-Ass arrives on a flying machine. Stunned, the men hesitate as Kick-Ass takes them out and rescues Hit Girl. Frank assumes the threat has been neutralized, but moments later, Kick-Ass and Hit Girl enter his office. Frank orders Chris to fight Kick-Ass while he deals with Hit Girl. Hit Girl holds her own against Frank, but is eventually overpowered. Frank mocks her, saying he wishes he had a daughter like her. Meanwhile, Kick-Ass defeats Red Mist and rushes to help Hit Girl. Just as Frank is about to kill her, Kick-Ass uses a bazooka to blast Frank out of the building. Frank explodes in midair, bringing an end to his reign. Afterward, Kick-Ass helps Hit Girl to the top of a building. She says she's sure her father would be proud of them. They remove their masks and introduce themselves properly for the first time. A while later, Marcus adopts Mindy and enrolls her in Dave's school. Elsewhere, Chris, now wearing a new costume, sits in Frank's office, vowing to avenge his father's death. Even though being a superhero seems exciting, it's also incredibly dangerous, especially when you don't have powers like Dave. If you could have one superpower, what would it be? If you liked the video, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification button so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.